Question to Mr. Perry Yu. Thank you, President. The Kai-Tak development area has all along adhered to the concept of sustainable development. The Kai-Tak Sports Park therein has received a Green Building Award, while the smart and green mass transit system in Kai-Tak will soon commence construction. However, there are views that the pace of taking forward the construction of onshore power facilities at the Kai-Tak cruise terminal has lagged behind. In this connection, will the government inform this council? 1. As some members of the industry have pointed out that with the persistent tightening of carbon emission standards by the International Maritime Organization, the use of onshore power while berthing will become an inevitable trend and a mandatory requirement for international cruise ships to meet the emission reduction requirements. Whether the government has compiled statistics on the number of cruise ships already equipped for the use of onshore power that have called at or planned to call at Hong Kong and have used Hong Kong as their home port between 2024 and 2026. 2. Whether it has grasped the data on the development of onshore power at major cruise terminals in the Asia-Pacific region and the mainland, including but not limited to the number of terminals already fully equipped with and using onshore power systems, the coverage rate of berths with onshore power facilities and the years in which the facilities were commissioned, if so, of the details, if not the reasons for that, and 3. Whether it has formulated measures for the expeditious installation of onshore power facilities at the cruise terminal to meet the future needs of the cruise industry, to avoid declines in the desire of international cruise ships to call at Hong Kong. Secretary for Culture, Sports and Tourism. In respect of the question raised by Mr. Perry Yu, having consulted the EEB and the TLB, the reply is as follows. The International Maritime Organization, or IMO, has set a reduction target, striving to reach net zero carbon emissions from international shipping by or around 2050. The use of green energy is a major trend in the international shipping industry. Hong Kong, China, as an associate member of the IMO, has long been supporting its emission reduction target. Installing onshore power supply facilities at cruise terminals allows cruise ships to connect to the onshore power grid while at berth, helping to reduce carbon emissions and fuel consumption from marine auxiliary engines while reducing local air pollutant emissions, in particular nitrogen oxides. The Kai-Tak cruise terminal had reserved space for setting up onshore power supply facilities during its construction. In response to the trend of adopting onshore power in the international cruise industry in recent years, the EEB, in collaboration with the CSTB, has commissioned a consultancy to conduct a study on the installation of onshore power supply facilities at the cruise terminal. This includes reviewing the trend of developing onshore power supply facilities in major ports around the world, analyzing the installation of onboard systems for onshore power connection and their use by cruise ships in various places, and studying the technical requirements and development costs. The government is reviewing the study reports submitted by the consultancy and considering whether onshore power supply facilities should be installed at the Kai-Tak cruise terminal. The use of onshore power is one of many feasible decarbonization measures and is not a mandatory requirement of the IMO. Its effectiveness depends on fuel mix of local power generation. If the power source is mainly renewable or low carbon energy, onshore power can effectively reduce overall carbon emissions. On the contrary, if the grid is dominated by high carbon energy, the emission reduction effectiveness will be limited. The international shipping industry is actively exploring the use of green maritime fuels such as LNG, green methanol, green ammonia, and hydrogen to accommodate different routes and infrastructure conditions. The reply to the various parts of the question is as follows. 1. According to the cruise ship berthing records of the Kai-Tak cruise terminal from 2024 to 25 and the berthing schedule for 2026, a total of 37 cruise ships belonging to different cruise lines have called or planned to call at the terminal. That's 286 ship calls in total over the 3 years. The government survey showed that 33 of these cruise ships, about 89%, are equipped with the conditions to use onshore power. 2. According to data published by the Cruise Lines International Association, as of October last year, a total of 38 ports worldwide that accommodate cruise ships are equipped with onshore power facilities for cruise ship use, accounting for about 3% of the world's cruise ports, while another 20 ports secured funding to develop onshore power supply facilities, and 30 ports were planning to implement onshore power. The development of onshore power is concentrated in the US, the EU, and China. China, some major cruise terminals in the Chinese mainland, such as Tianjin, Xiamen, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen, are equipped with onshore power. 3. Whether international cruise ships choose to visit Hong Kong hinges on comprehensive considerations involving various factors, including the attractiveness of the entire region and itineraries, the uniqueness of onshore excursions, visitors' experience, transport connectivity with other places, and cost effectiveness. As for the compliance with emission reduction, as mentioned, the use of onshore power is only one feasible option. Even if onshore power is available, the choice of cruise lines to use onshore power or other green fuels involves various factors, including cost effectiveness, technical compatibility, and berthing time. Given the government's policy direction on encouraging the use of green fuels by ocean-going vessels, we will take into account cost effectiveness when considering whether onshore power facilities should be installed at the Kai Tak Cruise Terminal so as to provide cruise ships with an additional option. In fact, Hong Kong's cruise tourism is sustaining momentum, with 189 ship calls in 2025. It's a year-on-year increase of 26%, covering 22 different international cruise brands, and the cruise passenger throughput in Hong Kong last year was 631,000, representing a year-on-year increase of 22%. The CSTB and the Hong Kong Tourism Board have been taking a multi-pronged approach to attract more international cruise ships to deploy to Hong Kong. Specific measures include the following. The government have earmarked in the 2023-24 budget funding for the Tourism Board for 4 financial years to attract more cruise ships to Hong Kong. Also, the government reserved in the 2025-26 budget new funding of $46 million to continue to provide support to the cruise industry until 2028-29, with priorities on encouraging cruise lines to increase their number of ship calls to Hong Kong, make overnight calls and use Hong Kong as the home port, and provide cruise lines making ship calls at the Kai Tak Cruise Terminal during the summer low season with concessions on the cruise ship dockage fees and passenger fees from 2025-26 to 2027-28. In addition, the Tourism Board actively is participating in regional and global cruise industry events to raise Hong Kong's profile as a cruise tourism destination, bolster market confidence, and promote Hong Kong's diverse experiences, strengthening strategic partnerships with global cruise lines and encouraging them to prioritize the inclusion of Hong Kong as a port of call in their Asian itineraries, and fostering coordinated itinerary planning and joint promotion, strengthening regional cooperation, and so on. Mr. Perry Yiu. Thank you, President. In the Tourism Development Blueprint 2.0, there is an annex. It is an action plan. It says that Hong Kong will speed up its development as a green and international cruise hub. As said in the major reply of the administration, there is room to accommodate these power supply systems in terms of our hardware and software. There were also studies in this regard, and I don't see any problems incorporating these systems. According to the reply, the government has considered twice to develop such power supply systems. I don't know how long the government needs to make a decision. Will the government enhance Hong Kong's competitiveness by providing an additional option for cruise liners? If an additional option can be provided to them, it will strengthen our competitiveness. Can the administration tell us whether it will work with various government bureaus to make a clear decision, and whether there will be a specific implementation timeline? If we fail to develop the onshore system, we will fall behind others. Undersecretary, as said in the major reply, we've commissioned a consultancy firm to conduct a study. The firm has submitted a report. The EEB and the CSTB are now reviewing the report. If it is decided that we will go ahead with the onshore power supply system, we will see if the market is interested in this. If the market does not show any interest, the cost will have to be borne by the government. We will have to consider the cost effectiveness as said by the reply. Let's see if the EEB has anything to add. Anything to add? The member asked whether there will be a timetable. President, we want to implement this as early as possible, but we have to see if there are any interests on the market side. This is because it involves millions of dollars. Mr. Tommy Chong. Thank you, President. The government is inviting tenders for the operator of the cruise terminal. Will clauses be added to the tender document or agreement to make sure that energy can be conserved and to ensure low carbon emission? This is to ensure sustainable development of the Kai Tak Cruise Terminal. Under Secretary, the open tender documents have included elements of sustainable development. For example, the use of renewable energy, waste reduction, waste recycling, as well as new eco-friendly measures are elements that we consider when we give the scores to the bidders. We will, based on the clauses in the tender documents, to make a comprehensive assessment. Next, Mr. Alvin Lee. As I said, there are other ports in the world that develop onshore power supply facilities. The costs incurred are quite substantial. Will the government provide incentives to the cruise terminal operators, such as ship dockage fees, so that the terminal operator would develop the onshore power system? Under Secretary, as mentioned, the upfront costs involve hundreds and millions of dollars. So we want to see if there will be an effective arrangement to ensure this is commercially viable. If the market is skeptical about this system, we will see if we can offer financial incentives to encourage the market to participate in developing this onshore power system. We will make prudent use of public money to ensure cost effectiveness. Next, Mr. Ronald Chen. Thank you, President. As said in the major reply, ships may use onshore power systems or green fuels. According to the reply, there are 38 ports worldwide that are equipped with onshore power supply facilities, and that accounts for about 3% of the world's cruise ports. I want to know if the consultancy firm commissioned will study the power tariffs charged by the 38 ports worldwide. I think power tariffs might be one of the major consideration for us to decide whether to develop the onshore power supply facilities. Which public officer will reply to the question? The consultancy study focuses on the installation of onshore power supply facilities at the Kai Tak Cruise Terminal. On the power tariff level, we drew reference from the fees charged by CLP. In April this year, the non-domestic power tariffs was about $1.504 per 1,000 kilowatt hours. As for whether the consultant will study the power tariff in other ports, the consultant did look at the power supply system in other ports, but there are no details on the electricity costs of the ports in other places. Next, Mr. Dominic Lee. According to the reply, about 3% of the ports worldwide are equipped with onshore power supply facilities. That's a low percentage. We may want to look at the top 10 ports in the world. I want to know how many of them are equipped with onshore power supply facilities. Under Secretary, I thank Mr. Dominic Lee for the question. As mentioned, the development of onshore power is concentrated in the US, the EU, and China. The major ports in mainland China are equipped with onshore power supply facilities. However, as mentioned, the use of onshore power is not a mandatory requirement. Cruise ships around the world can make use of green energy in order to meet the emission reduction target. In Hong Kong, we impose relevant requirements as well. Vessels that come to Hong Kong have to meet the local emission reduction requirement as well. So simply put, the use of onshore power is a backup option. Overall speaking, we have to consider cost effectiveness. Dr. Johnny, there are 3 home ports in the GBA, including the ones in Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong. In Shenzhen and Guangzhou, there are onshore power supply system, but we don't have such system in Hong Kong. Will that compromise the attractiveness of Hong Kong? Undersecretary, as mentioned in the major reply, when a cruise liner decides whether to come to Hong Kong, they take into consideration multiple factors, including transport connectivity with other places, the experience of passengers, as well as the design of the itineraries. Whether they can meet the emission reduction target could be one consideration as well. However, there are various options for them to meet the target. The use of onshore power is just one feasible option. And whether they can make use of onshore power supply facilities hinges on various factors as well. Therefore, we don't think whether we're equipped with the power system is an important consideration. Of course, we will strive to provide more options for international cruise ships so that it can help alleviate their concerns. Next, Mr. Dominic Lee. Thank you, President. Thanks to the government, there have been various financial support offered by the government to the cruise industry. These measures are included in the major reply. The onshore power supply facilities can be regarded as a one-off investment. How do you gauge whether developing such a system is cost-effective? Undersecretary, as mentioned, the upfront cost is very substantial for developing such facilities. It involves hundreds and millions of dollars. We have to make sure that investors are interested in this to make sure that this is commercially viable and that it can provide services to international cruise ships. However, if there is a lack of interest in the market, we will have to consider whether we should provide other incentives, and that would involve the use of public money. So we have to consider carefully. That is, whether the investment involved or the public resources involved can help bring sufficient economic benefits or benefits to our environment. Mr. Perry Yu. The data published by the Cruise Lines International Association show that of the 200-some international cruise ships, 80 or 90% of them are equipped with the onshore power connection systems. Many cruise terminals around the world are located in remote areas. However, the Kai Tak Cruise Terminal is situated in the urban center. Why did I pose this question of whether the administration will develop the onshore power supply facilities? I once swam in the Victoria Harbour, and in the morning, I smelled diesel oil, and the smell came from the cruise terminal. I'm not saying that there are any significant issues with the smell, but we do want our air to be cleaner. We should not mandate international cruise liners to use the onshore power facilities, but if we have the power facilities and if cruise liners would like to reduce their emission, then we will be able to provide an additional option to them, and that will strengthen our competitiveness. So my question is, if we are to build this onshore power supply facility, how much would that cost? I remember that years ago the government said it will cost about $3 million. Undersecretary, we did make an estimate on the cost for each set of onshore power supply facilities. It will cost about $300 million per set. If we are to provide 2 sets, it will cost $600 million. Will these facilities be cost effective? It will depend on the electricity cost. The cruise liners will have to decide whether it's cheaper for them to make use of green fuels or make use of the onshore power facilities. Electricity costs depend on the fuel mix, that is how many green fuel you decide to use, as well as fossil fuels, of which the prices have been increasing recently. So it depends on the actual circumstances. Mr. Chen Pui-leung, would you like to pose a supplementary question? Yes, Ms. Judy Chen. I heard the Secretary's reply, and it was over 10 years ago, in around 2015, that the government first studied this, but we haven't seen much progress over the past decade. According to the Secretary, if there are investors interested, they would go ahead with the project. Will the government consider a public-private partnership model to develop this infrastructure? Undersecretary, we do not rule out this option. As mentioned, we hope the market can operate the service effectively. If the market is of the view that they lack the conditions to develop the system, the government could provide incentives, and we don't rule out the option of public-private partnership model. Time is up for question 2. Members who would like to follow up on this, please follow up in other occasions.
Question 3, Mr. Andrew Yao.